The reception was everything I had dreamed it would be. Ivory candles on every table. White roses wrapped around the archways. The kind of soft golden light that makes everyone look a little more beautiful than they actually are. 200 guests laughing, clinking glasses, dancing between courses. And me standing in the center of all of it in a dress I had saved for quietly, privately, without telling anyone. I should have been happy. I was almost. But I had learned a long time ago to never fully let my guard down around Elena. My name is Sophia. I was 29 on my wedding day. A systems analyst with my own apartment, my own car, my own savings account that nobody else had a key to. I had built a life that was clean and self-sufficient, and I had done it carefully because I grew up watching what happened to women who depended too heavily on the approval of other people. Daniel, my husband, still a strange and wonderful word, had proposed at a quiet dinner, just the two of us, no audience. That was the version of him I had fallen in love with. Private, thoughtful, genuinely kind. His mother was a different story entirely. Elena was a woman who believed her love was a currency, and she spent it selectively. From the moment Daniel introduced us, she had decided something about me that she never said out loud but communicated in 100 small ways. The slight pause before she hugged me. The way she would compliment other women in the room and then turn to me and ask something practical and cold. So, what is it you do again, exactly? The gift of a cookbook at Christmas when she knew I worked 60-hour weeks. The comments about Daniel's last girlfriend, offered warmly, as if I were supposed to take notes. Daniel always said I was reading too much into it. I was not reading too much into it. In the weeks before the wedding, the tension had reached a new pitch. Elena had inserted herself into every decision, the florist, the caterer, the seating chart. When I gently pushed back on the seating arrangement, she looked at me across the table with that specific, patient smile of hers and said, "I'm only trying to help, sweetheart. I just want the day to be perfect." And then she moved the placement cards back the moment I left the room. I found out from the venue coordinator, who apologized as if it were her fault. I didn't tell Daniel. I filed it. I had a drawer inside myself where I kept things like that, organized and labeled, waiting. By the morning of the wedding, that drawer was nearly full. The ceremony was perfect. Whatever else Elena was, she understood appearances, and she would never have caused a scene in front of a crowd. She wore a pale blue dress that coordinated beautifully with the flowers. I suspected that was not a coincidence, and she cried at exactly the right moment during the vows. Daniel squeezed my hand as we walked back down the aisle, and for a few hours, I let myself believe that the hardest part was over. I was wrong. It happened during the champagne toast. The reception was at full noise, the DJ had just come on, the caterers were moving between tables, and most guests were on their feet. I was standing slightly apart from the main crowd, near the sweetheart table, just catching my breath for a moment. My champagne flute was on the table beside me, still half full. I saw Elena approach from the left. That alone was not strange. What was strange was the angle. She moved to the table from behind, not toward me, eyes scanning the room as she reached past the floral arrangement. Her back was angled outward, blocking the sight line from the main tables. I went very still. She reached into the small beaded clutch she was carrying and removed something. Her hand moved quickly, deliberately, over my glass. I watched her drop something in. She replaced the item, closed the clutch, straightened up, turned to me with a wide, warm smile as if she had simply walked over to say something kind. "There you are," she said. "I've been looking for you. Are you ready for the toast?" My heart was steady. That surprised me, looking back. I had always imagined that if something like this ever happened, if someone truly crossed a line, I would feel rage or panic or some version of collapse. What I actually felt was a cold, crystalline clarity. The kind of focus that only comes when you stop hoping you are wrong about someone and finally accept that you are right. "Almost," I said, smiling back at her. "Will you grab me a napkin? I think there's something on the tablecloth." She turned. I swapped the glasses. She turned back, handed me the napkin, and touched my arm gently. "You look beautiful today, Sophia." "Truly." "Thank you, Elena," I said. "So do you." She gathered everyone together about 4 minutes later. The clinking of silverware on crystal, the hush of 200 people turning toward the head table. Elena was practiced at moments like this. She held the room easily, her voice warm and measured, moving through a speech that was technically about Daniel and me but was, in every meaningful way, a performance about what a devoted and selfless mother she had been. I stood beside Daniel and smiled and held my untouched glass. Elena raised hers, my original glass, and said, "To the happy couple." She took a long, deep sip. For a moment, nothing happened. And then something did. Her expression shifted, not dramatically, not immediately, but in the way of face changes when the body sends an unexpected signal. A brief flicker behind the eyes. A subtle tension in the jaw. Then her hand loosened slightly, and the flute tipped, and the sound of shattering crystal cut cleanly through the music. 200 people turned toward the sound. The room fell silent. Elena's face had gone pale. She was gripping the edge of the table. I looked at her and I did not move. Because here is what Elena did not know, what no one in that room knew yet. 3 days before the wedding, I had made a phone call. And that phone call had started something that was already in motion. She still had no idea what I had set in place. The room stayed silent for what felt much longer than it was. Someone near the back laughed nervously, assuming Elena had simply lost her grip. A few guests started to move toward her. The DJ killed the music. I watched all of it from exactly where I was standing still, composed, my untouched champagne in my hand, and I let it happen around me without rushing to fill the space. Daniel stepped toward his mother. "Mom, are you okay?" Elena steadied herself against the table. Her color was coming back, slowly, but her eyes were glassy and her breath was uneven. She waved him off with one hand, the practiced gesture of a woman who had spent decades managing how she appeared to others. "I'm fine. The heat, I think. I'm fine." She looked at me once. Just once. A quick, searching look, the kind that asked a question she couldn't say out loud. I looked back at her with nothing on my face. Let me tell you about the phone call. 72 hours before the wedding, I had contacted a private GP I found through a colleague, discreet, professional, someone used to handling sensitive requests without drama. I had explained, carefully, that I had reason to believe someone might attempt to put a substance in my drink at a social event. I had asked what my options were. She had been calm and practical about it, the way good doctors are. She told me about certain compounds that cause rapid but temporary physical distress when consumed, nothing dangerous, nothing lasting, but enough to make a person feel, for about 20 minutes, like the floor was moving beneath them. She told me this because I asked specifically whether such things existed. She did not tell me to put one in anyone's drink. I want to be precise about what I did and did not do. I switched the glasses. I gave Elena back her own intentions. Whatever she had put in my champagne was now in her system, not mine. I had not added anything. I had only removed myself from the equation and let the math work itself out. That is a distinction I had thought about carefully. The reception continued. Elena was helped to a side room by one of Daniel's aunts. I moved through the rest of the evening the way I had planned to, greeting guests, cutting cake, dancing with my father, laughing at the right moments. I was present for all of it. Not performing. Actually present, in a way I hadn't expected, because a weight I'd been carrying for 2 years had quietly lifted. Daniel checked on his mother twice. Both times he came back and told me she seemed better, but was going to leave early. He was concerned, but not alarmed. I nodded and squeezed his hand and told him she'd probably just overdone it with the champagne. He believed me. I felt something complicated about that, and I set it aside for later. The phone call Elena received the next morning was the one that changed things more permanently. I had a friend, a lawyer named Priya, someone I had known since university, someone who thought in systems the way I did. 3 days before the wedding, I had gone to her apartment and sat at her kitchen table and told her everything. Not just the champagne incident, which she correctly pointed out I couldn't have anticipated with certainty. Everything. The 2 years of documentation I had been keeping in a folder on a password-protected drive. Dates, descriptions, witnesses where I had them. The venue coordinator who could confirm the seating chart interference. The caterer's assistant who had heard Elena tell a vendor not to confirm certain floral arrangements I had already paid for without checking with her first. Small things individually. A clear pattern collectively. Priya had looked at the folder for a long time. Then she said, "This isn't nothing. We didn't plan anything punitive. That was never the goal. What we drafted together was a letter. Specific, factual, and without a single emotional sentence in it. It outlined what had been documented. It explained that if the behavior continued after the wedding, the documentation would be shared with Daniel in full, formally, and that decisions about the future of the relationship, all relationships, would proceed from there." The letter was delivered to Elena's home address the morning after the wedding, while Daniel and I were on a flight to Portugal. Priya sent me a message when the courier confirmed delivery. I was somewhere over the Atlantic when I read it. I ordered a coffee, looked out the window at the clouds below, and felt nothing except a quiet and complete sense of having done what was necessary. Daniel found out on the third day of our honeymoon. Not from me, or not only from me. Elena called him. She was not calm. She told him that I had attacked her, that I had done something to her drink, that the letter was threatening and cruel, and that I had been orchestrating something against her for years. He came to me with the phone still in his hand. I told him to sit down. I opened the folder, the same one I had shown Priya. I walked him through it item by item, quietly, without crying, without asking him to choose sides. I explained what I had seen at the reception. I explained the glass switch. I told him I had not added anything to her drink, only removed my own from the equation, and I told him that if he wanted to verify that, he was welcome to. He was quiet for a very long time. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Not defensively. Genuinely, with the sound of someone who was starting to understand that he had missed something significant. "I tried," I said. "Early on, I tried. And you told me I was reading too much into it." Another long silence. "I know," he said. The conversation with Elena happened 2 weeks after we returned. Daniel arranged it on neutral ground at a cafe. Not a confrontation, a reckoning, which is a quieter and more permanent thing. She denied most of it. That didn't surprise me. She reframed what she couldn't deny. The seating chart was just a misunderstanding. The vendor calls were helpfulness. The years of coldness were simply her having a hard time letting her son go. She cried at one point. I believed her tears were real. I also believed they were beside the point. When she finished, I said, simply and without raising my voice, "I'm not asking you to apologize for the past. I'm telling you what the future looks like. If the behavior changes, we build something functional. If it doesn't, I will protect myself, and that will have consequences for everyone." She looked at me for a moment with something new in her face. Not respect, not quite. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement that she had miscalculated. She nodded. Things did not transform overnight. Elena was not suddenly warm. She was not suddenly the mother-in-law from the films, full of softness and welcome. But the passive aggression stopped. The interference stopped. The careful, targeted coldness stopped. What replaced it was a kind of cautious formality, not close, but not hostile. A negotiated distance that everyone could live inside. Daniel and I talked about it often in those first months. Honestly, more honestly than we had talked about anything before. He told me he had sensed something was wrong between us and his mother, but had been afraid of what it would mean to acknowledge it fully. I told him that fear had cost me 2 years of comfort in my own relationship, and that I needed him to choose differently going forward. He said he would. He has mostly, and that is enough. There is something I want to say about what I did and why I've thought about it so many times since. I did not enjoy the moment when Elena's glass hit the floor. I want to be honest about that. There was no rush of triumph, no satisfying vindication. What I felt, watching her face change, was closer to grief. Grief for the version of this story where none of it had been necessary, where she had simply decided to accept me. Where I hadn't needed a password-protected folder or a lawyer friend or the cold arithmetic of a glass swap. But I had needed those things. And I had used them. And I will not apologize for that. There is a version of womanhood that asks you to absorb hostility quietly and call it grace. To document nothing, expect nothing, accept the treatment you receive as the cost of keeping the peace. I tried that version for 2 years. It didn't produce peace. It produced a drawer full of small humiliations and a woman at my wedding who believed I would drink whatever she put in front of me. I am not that woman. What I know now, sitting on the other side of all of it, is this. The moment I stopped hoping Elena would change on her own and started protecting myself clearly and without apology, that was the moment the dynamic shifted. Not because she became good. Because I stopped being available to be harmed. Boundaries don't require the other person to agree with them. They only require you to mean them. I meant mine. I still have the folder. I update it occasionally when something warrants it. I don't expect to use it again. But I'm glad I built it. What would you have done? Would you have swapped the glass or walked away entirely? Let me know in the comments.